Okay, we are going to get started. It's 12 o'clock. I think it's 12:01. Can everyone hear me okay? Dr. Brewer, am I okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Dean's Forum. Glad you can join us again today. We are glad to be back after 2 months of hiatus in the spring semester. This is the fourth or the part 4 of all things COVID. In the email I sent out, it said part 3, but actually it's part 4 of all things COVID. And just before we get started, I just want to share some good news. Some good news that we received this weekend. The good news is that hospitalization from COVID has decreased across the board nationally. Okay, about 15% down, which is a good sign. It's a good sign that more people are getting vaccinated, and that that the Delta variant has plateaued, and hopefully we are going to begin to see some decline. That's a good news. And if that continues, if we continue in that trend, if things begin to decline, hospitalization and illness begin to decline, and then we see more people get vaccinated, hopefully the new variant, the Mu variant, will not have an opportunity to rise. So that being said, let me go to here, and during part 1, I'm just going to recap on some of the things we talked about in the previous time. During part 1, let me go back and just tell you guys that again, for the record, my name is Alex Ibe, the Dean of Humanities and Sciences, and my co-host today, moderating the chat room, will be Dr. Brewer, the chair of Department of Humanities. And during our part 1 of COVID, these are the things we talked about. We talked about the digital divide and the educational equity. We talked about the impact of technology on our work, school, and how those technology impacted our relationship, how we were social distancing, and we're still able to communicate, the socio-economic impact of COVID. We talked about all those things, including the psychological effect of COVID. And then, of course, the question we asked them was, could work from home be the norm? And will remote learning continue to be the norm? It seems so for now. But we think that things will normalize somewhere in the future. But we don't know how long. Let's go to part 2. And in part 2, we talked about the unmasking innovation and creativity in times of crisis. How faculty members became very innovative and creative in delivery of their subjects, to their students, and how students also become very creative through the learning process. Those were very good things that happened. So during this time of crisis or pandemic, we saw a lot of innovation and creativity. And most importantly, all those things were done deliberately. It was through deliberate action that we were able to achieve those good things. And then part 3, we talked about managing stress of pandemic and schoolwork. How do you assess your risk of exposure? Your risk of exposure, we talked about the 15 minutes rule. When you are in the community of people or around people in gatherings, try not to spend more than 15 minutes in close contact. After 15 minutes, we feel that you've acquired enough viral load within your system. So remember now that we talked about if on a daily basis you associate yourself with so many different groups of people and spending more than 15 minutes with them, you build in this viral load within your system. And the viral load you build is what determines if you get sick or not. So anyway, we talked about those things. And then we also talked about quarantine. How long should you quarantine? And what is isolation? When should you isolate? All those we talked about. We can still revisit those things today if we have the time. All right. And why should you get tested? Well, today, let's go today. Today, part 4, we are going to pose some questions for you. What is COVID-19 variant of interest? That's what we are hearing nowadays. Do people develop immunity to COVID-19 after recovery? What is long COVID, also known as the post-acute sequelae of COVID-19? How long does COVID-19 survive on clothes, and how effective is the vaccine? So those are the things we want to talk about today. And I will make this more interactive. So during the conversation, I would like you to jump in, or ask your questions through the chat room, and Dr. Brewer will let you know if you want to speak. Dr. Brewer will let you in to speak. So let's begin with the very first question. What is COVID-19 variant of interest? Okay, we know that when virus transmits from one person to another, they tend to mutate. When they mutate, thereby creating multiple variants when they mutate. So the COVID-19 so far has yielded thousands, literally thousands of variants, but only five thus far are considered variants of concerns or interest by WHO, World Health Organization. And then, of course, those variants of interest, why do we classify them as variants of interest? Is because of the rate of transmission, the way they transmit. So we've had the 5 variants are the alpha variant, the beta variant, the gamma variant, the delta variant, which surged recently, which is still surging, which has just plateaued this weekend, and then of course the mu variant. All right. WHO adopted the Greek alphabet naming system as a user-friendly alternative to reduce the geographical stigma associated with virus from the place of origin, or in certain places where they are found, I should say. So, and then of course, remember now, the alpha was the original variant we have here. The one that surged in the United States was the alpha, the original one. And of course, the delta, as we know it now, was the one that was dominant in India. So we stopped using the name, the variant from India, or the variant from South Africa, or the variant from Brazil. It was more like a stigma. It's not that those variants came from those regions. It just happens that the mutation that they were seeing in those areas and the transmission rate of those variants in those areas was dominant. So that's why we named them as such. Okay, and of course, the 24 letters of the Greek alphabet will soon run out. If the way we are naming those variants, once they run out, WHO already are working on other ways or other alphabets that they can use to name the variants of interest, should that become necessary, right? So that is how we classify the variants based on how we name the variants. And what is mutation? Of course, we know that we all know now the shape or structure of the virus. We know the virus have those spikes on their surfaces. those spikes they have on their surfaces are actually what they use to bind to the cells, to the human cells when they infect. So those receptor binding sites will change. When they change, that makes it difficult for antibodies to be able to bind to them and neutralize them. Okay, that also makes it difficult for vaccination to become more effective. It also reduces treatments and efficacy, so and making and potentially making those viruses more transmissible. But so far, the 5 variants of interest so far are still protected by the vaccine that we have right now. The 3 types of vaccine we have are still effective against these 5 variants. So that's where we are. However, if we have a decreased rate of vaccination, chances are we are going to have an increased rate of mutation and more variants could surface. And if more variants surface, and there is a possibility that it could weaken the effectiveness or the efficacy of the vaccine. So that's what we want to avoid. Right?
Alex, Dr. Ide, can you explain what conditions prompt a particular variant to become a variant of interest?
What condition? I'm sorry, I didn't get the whole question.
Yes, it's in the chat too. What are the conditions which prompt a particular variant to become a variant of interest?
What prompts them to become a variant of interest is once we begin to see the increased rate of mutation. And when we begin to see the receptor sites, the receptor binding site where the antibodies bind to them, if we begin to see that the antibodies are not binding properly to them, because normally it is like a lockstep process, you know. The antibodies fits in like a key to your door. It fits in to those spikes on those virus. When the antibody can no longer bind properly to those spikes, then that tells us there is a problem. And that's when we begin to name them and aggressively look at them and name them as variant of interest. Because if that continues, if it continues such that the efficacy of those antibodies against those viruses continue to reduce to say 70%, 60%, then that becomes very scary. Okay, normally the antibody is supposed to work about 90% of the time at least. Any other question?
Right. The question about, I think, the naming protocol, and then the comment is that the naming and association of these variants with particular regions and cultures can encourage additional stereotyping. There isn't a question associated with that, but I think, you know, as a point of conversation.
Yes, it is so important that the World Health Organization moves very quickly to change the naming of those variants of interest because of the stigma it poses to those regions of the world where they are dominant. Okay, we of course when we began to see the Delta variant here in the United States, we start seeing it in areas where people who are contracting it never traveled to India, never come in contact with anybody from India. So we say, oh, okay. So it all depends, you know, how it mutates in a region. If the virus mutates differently in a region from the rest of the from other parts of the world, then it's going to be named based on that region. But we stopped doing that, and instead we just use the Greek alphabet instead. All right, let's go to the second question that we have. Do people develop immunity to COVID-19 after recovering? Yeah, majority of people who recover from COVID-19 have significant amount of antibodies or memories of the virus for about, for an average of about, say 7 months, 6 to 8 months after infection. These individuals still have those antibodies, and there are also memory cells that remembers the virus. So should they get reinfected, those antibodies protect them from the virus. And let me also say this, that these individuals tend to benefit more from vaccination 3 or more months after the infection. These individuals will build a remarkable amount of antibodies within their system. So we encourage those individuals who contract and survive the COVID-19 to get vaccinated, because they stand to benefit more from the vaccination than those who are not even infected in most cases, in terms of the antibody titers that they build up in the system. All right, so that is that. But after about 8-9 months, will it wear off? Yes. And let me also say something, even though we're going to talk about the vaccine a little bit here, the trend, what we are going to with the booster shot that we are talking about right now, it's going to become the norm. Chances are by this time next year, COVID will be getting out of this pandemic. If more people get vaccinated, by this time next year, we'll be getting out of the pandemic. And then booster shot will then become a norm, whereby we get it every year, the same way we're getting the flu vaccine. So that is going to be the thing of the future, unfortunately. All right. Let's go to the next question. What is long COVID, also known as the post-acute sequelae of COVID-19? This year, the long COVID, also known as COVID-19 long haulers, the long haulers. And of course, through the National Institute of Health, is now being referred as the post-acute sequelae of COVID-19. These here are persistent or new symptoms that develop several weeks after initial infection of COVID-19. Generally about 4 to 9 weeks, or 4 to 9 weeks after recovering from COVID-19, then all of a sudden you have these symptoms. Okay, it can become these symptoms become increased in intensity. Even those original symptoms the individual had will become of greater intensity. Things like fatigue, shortness of breath, even taking a little walk, up to get up from bed to use the restroom becomes difficult for most people after that. So, and this year could continue for a long time. But the scary part, the one that scares most people, is the debilitating symptoms of neurological that are of neurological nature, like memory challenge. You cannot think fast. You cannot remember things the way you used to, and memory becomes a challenge for some of these individuals, and that is what is carrying most of these individuals with the long COVID. And also, let me also say that it is more prevalent among younger people than older people. People in their 30s and maybe early 40s tends to suffer more from this long COVID than the older population. Right? So the notion that we say, well, hey, I don't care, I can have COVID and recover from it, is no big deal. It is a big deal. We want you to survive, but it is the long COVID that becomes a problem, because we don't know right now, is relatively new. So we don't know how long these symptoms will last. If it will last for a year or 2 years, or if it will even get intense and worse and lead to more debilitating illness in the future, we don't know. So that is why it is important to get all the protection that you can, if it means getting vaccinated and doing all the right things, still social distance, still wearing your mask. Those things are very helpful. All right. Any question on that? I can do it. Does anyone have any question concerning the long COVID? Any comment, question from anyone? Nothing in the chat room, Dr. Brewer? All right. That's interesting. Okay, but then let's talk about, we're going to spend more time on the vaccine. Let's talk about the how long does COVID-19 survive on clothes? Generally, at room temperature, you can still detect COVID on your clothing, in fabrics for up to 2 days. So if you wear clothes and you are in a very large crowd, and chances are, if people are not wearing masks and COVID is all over the place, you can still have it in your clothing, for up to 2 days. But that is short-lived. But when in terms of plastic and plastic materials and metals, those ones, you can have them there up to 7 days. So that's why it's always good to continue to disinfect and clean up surfaces, because those COVID could be around, they could hang around for a long time, and most people think they will. All right, and of course, some of us begin to lax our ways after the vaccination. Some of us begin to not take necessary precautions, as we did at the very beginning of the COVID. When you get home, you make sure you change your clothes or throw your clothes in the dryer and you heat them up in the dryer, or wash them, whichever one you do, and disinfect everything, including your groceries and things that you do. But we are beginning to relax a lot about those because of the vaccination. But again, remember, we can still catch the COVID even with vaccination. Okay.
I got a question about antivirals. If are there antivirals being developed for COVID-19? What are some of the processes being used?
Yes, there are some antivirals that are being developed, and there are some that are being used as well. But the most important thing here, the treatment that is out there in the front, of course, which is the monoclonal antibodies, is a treatment option available. It is a form of antiviral. What it does is that it reduces the symptoms and also stops the progression of the viral replication in the body. The monoclonal antibodies is only good for if you get it at the very early stage of the COVID infection. So once you begin to notice the symptoms at the very early stage, and if given to those individuals, they tend to do very well. So the monoclonal antibodies is a miracle medication. Let me put it that way. It's a miracle medication. It does wonders. Okay. Now they are giving it to a lot of people. It's very expensive, you know. I don't think the government is picking up the tab on all of those the way they're picking up the vaccine. They are very expensive, but if you are privileged to get one at the very beginning of the infection or the early symptoms, you will do very well with those. And then let me talk about the ivermectin. Let me talk about the ivermectin that people have been talking about that is used in horses for deworming horses. This is a miracle. It is a miracle medication. It's been around for a long time. All right. We've used it in humans at a very low dose to take care of parasitic worms. All right. But what becomes a problem lately is because people are using the heavy dosage that is meant for horses. And that's why a lot of people start winding up in the hospital. So it's not approved. It is not an approved medication for COVID, even though there's a research going on right now. The reason why the FDA is telling you don't use it, there's a research going on right now to see if at all there's any benefit with ivermectin, you know, for COVID treatment. They are still working on it, so it's not something that we encourage people to take. So those who are going to take the heavy doses that are meant for horses, it could kill you. You know, if you wind up in the hospital, it's not a good thing. So now, having said that, let's talk about the vaccine. The vaccine is what we all were asking for some time ago. By this time last year, we all were wishing to have a vaccine because we know that the vaccine was going to make a change in our lives, and which it has in so many ways. So before I get into that conversation, I would like this to be more of your conversation. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about the vaccine, the efficacy of the vaccine, the make of the vaccine, the speed at which the vaccine was developed, and so on and so forth. And what is mRNA? And will messenger RNA or mRNA, will it have any effect in your body, in your system? Will it incorporate into your DNA and make you somebody else or something else? Those are the various questions floating around in the social media somewhere, you know. But what is the actual truth about the vaccine? Okay, I'm going to start off by saying, let me just give you guys a basic biology of what mRNA is all about. mRNA, the M stands for messenger. It's messenger RNA because the RNA is carrying a message, a code. So that's how it's named mRNA. That's number one. In basic biology, we talk about transcription and translation, how we transcribe gene from our DNA, and that gene that we transcribe from our DNA onto an RNA becomes messenger RNA because it's carrying gene from the DNA. And then that messenger RNA is then used to make proteins. So the good thing about the vaccine is that we've had this medical technology in place for decades. We've been working on messenger RNA in decades, trying to see if we can use it for cure or for things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, things like that. The work was in progress until the COVID-19 surfaced. So people became very creative. Just the same way our faculty and students became creative to learn and to teach, that's the same way we became creative. We said, okay, how about we try it with the vaccine? Since we already know the genetic makeup of the COVID-19, we already know the genetic makeup. So all we do, take the gene, map out the gene, sequence it in the lab, and then copy it onto an RNA. That becomes your messenger RNA. And then preserve it with some other chemicals, lipids, let me say lipids, and some other things to put it together so that it can be able to be transferred into the human body and be able to bring about some effect. So what happens then with the vaccine is that when giving the vaccine, all it does is going to trigger your cells to begin to make proteins that mimic the protein on the COVID-19. And once your cells begin to make those proteins, then your system will kick in, your immune system will kick in and begin to make antibodies. So those antibodies will then protect you because it recognizes those foreign proteins. So should you then be exposed to the real COVID, those antibodies you've created will protect you. It's just that simple. That messenger RNA will not be incorporated into your DNA. It is not going to get into the nucleus of your cell. The nucleus of your cell is the genetic house or vault of your body. And messenger RNA, even the ones that your body makes naturally, when your body makes them in your nucleus, they move out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm or the cytosol outside of the nucleus. So they never have a place or any function within the nucleus. So taking this vaccine, the messenger RNA cannot get into your nucleus of your cell, cannot be incorporated into your DNA by any means. So that there is the first myth. So we want to make sure that is there. So the messenger RNA from the vaccine is not going to cause you to change or mess up your genetic makeup. No, it doesn't. That's not how they work. All right. Okay. Any questions so far? I'm sure somebody have a question about the vaccine. No questions? Are you kidding me? I'm sure somebody have a question about the vaccine.
I mean, if everybody's muted too, so if you want me to unmute you, just let me know in the chat box. But I am not getting any questions.
Yeah, I see a lot. I can see a lot of my colleagues who are biologists and who have tremendous background in messenger RNA and stuff like that. I was hoping that they will weigh in one way or the other. And then those of you too who have your own concerns or questions about the vaccine, the purpose here is to have that conversation.
I'm going to unmute this person too in a second. I hope I say her name right. It looks like Brianna. What about vaccines for a teenager on a biologic drug for IBD? Is it safe and or effective? So let me unmute her too, so you all can.
The vaccine for teenagers?
I'm sorry?
What was the part of the first part of the question?
Well, my question really is, I have a 13-year-old son who has Crohn's disease and is on a immunosuppressant. He's on Humira right now, a biologic. And his GI has basically said that it's kind of our call because there haven't been any types of studies done on kids with those kinds of issues. So I was trying to see if you had any input on the safety or efficacy of it on kids like that?
Very good question. Crohn's disease is most patients with Crohn's disease have an immunocompromised system, and the only thing that will prevent them from taking the vaccine will be if they are on certain medications. However, their clinician, their physician can hold off on those medications for about a couple of weeks leading up to them receiving the vaccine, because I feel the vaccine will still benefit them tremendously at the long run, because they stand more to lose if they contract the virus because of their immunocompromised nature. So I will say that having a conversation with the GI, physician or whoever they're seeing, to say, okay, is there possible we can hold off the medication for some time and get this vaccine and then resume the medication down the line? That would be a good thing to do. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Yes. Sure. Yes. Here, Gary and Magus. If your hand up.
I can't hear you. Could they repeat the question? Or?
I wasn't sure if that was a question.
Okay. All right. Any other question? I'm sure somebody there has a question about this vaccine that they want to ask so bad. If it's safe to get the vaccine, the answer is yes. Okay. Is it okay? Before we did very well by wearing mask and social distancing and stuff like that. And then, of course, then with the vaccination coming out, and then some of us having contracted the virus and recovered from it, then we begin to relax a little bit, but forgetting that we still have vulnerable population amongst us. We still have those under the age of 12 who are not vaccinated yet, and who don't have access to those vaccines. But the good thing is that before the end of the year, we are going to have vaccination for children as young as 6 months. As young as 6 months. There'll be vaccination for those, almost everybody before the end of the year, because if not before the end of the year, but definitely before the end of the year for those 6 years and 6 years old and above, but for 6 months to those under 6 years, hopefully before April of next year. So that should be vaccination for everybody.
Dr. eBay, I have a question. Hi, it's Tasha.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? I had a question I posted in the chat window as well about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I know we were talking about the boosters and all of that. And I know when they pulled the Johnson & Johnson from the market, there was some skepticism and all of that. So did you have any specific thoughts on how to proceed or recommendations about how to proceed for someone that's had the JNJ vaccine?
Well, the JNJ vaccine, right now, they are also working on the booster shot for J&J. Of course, the result that just came, some of the studies that just came out recently shows that J&J vaccine actually has more efficacy than the Pfizer vaccine, in terms of the longevity of the protection that they provide people. So yes, we are going to be seeing booster shot for J&J, but before the end of the year, definitely it's going to be there. It's in the works right now. They've just not submitted all the papers to FDA. We know Moderna is doing the same thing. Moderna have submitted theirs. So in the next maybe by November latest, we should have something from J&J and Moderna in terms of the booster shots.
Thank you.
But they are all very efficacious. So it's going to become an annual thing after we go through the whole as we get out of the pandemic. All right. Question.
I have a question.
Yes.
I work in healthcare. Is there, I see the COVID patients, maybe, I probably have like 7 of them a day. Do you think from me being exposed and I'm vaccinated, I'm building up immunity, even though I'm wearing my PPE?
Yes, you are in a good shape if you're vaccinated. There's nothing to be afraid of, but continue to wear your PPE. That's a good practice. And it's folks like you that needs the booster shot. I will recommend the booster shot for you after 6 months of being vaccinated, of being fully vaccinated. I will recommend it for you as a healthcare worker that comes in constant contact with patients who have COVID. Yes.
I'm sorry. My supervisor said that they don't, I guess the healthcare workers don't need the booster shot, and I asked her why. She couldn't give me a question. And then another question is, I fear for bringing this germ home to my family or a virus.
Well, if you have younger children or family members at home that are under the age of 12 that are not vaccinated, yes, you should continue to exercise every precaution at home when you get home in terms of your clothing. And since you are constantly around patients who have COVID, the possibility of taking COVID home in clothing and other things is possible, even in your hair or anything, even though you are fully gowned with your PPE, you are still within the hospital setting. A hospital setting is not 100% sterile. So there's still that chance of taking things back home. I would say exercising caution would be the ideal thing to do. And as long as you do all those things, you should be okay, and your family should be okay. But again, we talk about viral load. How do we transmit it? You could be vaccinated, you could carry the virus, and you can still transmit it to other people. But limiting the amount that we carry in our system would be very beneficial. That means, what I mean by that is watching how long we spend around people, what we call the 15 minutes rule. When you are in a conversation with people or around people, try to limit that conversation to about 15 minutes and walk out to get some air, or something, Those are the things we will recommend for you to do. But again, the concern has always been for those of you who have little kids at home under the age of 12, whom you still go home to, and after being out, whether you work in a hospital or you work in a school setting or in a grocery store or any of those things, chances are that you could be taking some virus home to your family. But we then hope that, we just hope that you are not exposing them enough for them to build enough viral load in their system to make them sick. So that's all we pray for.
What about vitamins? Like, do that help?
I'm
or
sorry?
your fighting chance? Vitamins, do that help your fighting chance? Or
I'm sorry, I didn't get the part. If you do what?
vitamins.
Oh, vitamins. Well, vitamins are good for us. We said, since the COVID, a lot of people have upped their vitamins, especially vitamin C, D, and your zinc mineral. So CD and zinc can help to boost your immune system. That much we know. And of course, your B complex also will help you out. There's nothing you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong taking those vitamins because they help to boost your immune system. But will they stop COVID from coming? The answer is no, but they can help you build antibodies and help you give you a fighting chance, so to speak.
Do you have, Dr. Ibe, any sort of, I don't know, I was diagnosed with COVID 2 weeks ago and I'm still showing symptoms, and my 6-month-old who is here with me, he was diagnosed with COVID as well, but he's doing way better. However, I have what I feel like is a lot of lingering symptoms. I still have the fatigue. I'm not coughing as much. I've done the inhalers and stuff, but I just feel like it's almost impossible for me to get out of bed in the morning. I feel so drained. Do you have any sort of tips or recommendations as to energy boosting that's natural?
Well, sorry to hear about that, but you are relatively young in terms of your infectivity. You just got infected not too long. So that being the case, it is not unusual to have the type of symptoms you are having right now. However, things that could help you will be just what I mentioned. If you can just take your B complex vitamins and of course add your C, D, and zinc into the equation, those will help boost your energy level to some extent. And drink lots of fluid, lots of fluid. But I will stay away from sugary products. Try not to drink things with sugar in them, because when you do, you feed the virus some more. Okay, so drinking water will be good. And of course, we talk about orange juice having vitamin C. We have those orange juice that are natural orange juice that have no added sugars in them. So those of you who are my nutrition students, there are no added sugar in them. And when you drink those type of beverages, you should be okay. But give it at least 2 more weeks or 3 weeks, and you should start feeling better. But continue to take your vitamins and drink lots of fluid, but make sure you add that C, D, and zinc into the equation. All right?
Thank you, Dr. Ibe.
Oh,
Very precious.
Thank you.
Dr. Ibe, I
Yes,
know Dr. Cook had a question.
yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you wanted me to ask it or type it. Dr. Ibe, I was just wondering if you could recommend some sites or where to go to find some sites to find the most current, the most peer-reviewed studies, information that's available. Obviously, I'm aware of the CDC, I'm aware of the institutions and read their policies and listen to the news, but I was just wondering if there are sites that you, for example, go to and would recommend personally to try to stay up to date, since things change so quickly with this particular situation.
Very good question. The sources I go to are the sources I would recommend you to go to, even though we are being bombarded from different angles through the social media. I would say CDC and NIH, National Institute of Health, as well as the World Health Organization. Those are credible organizations that update things. And then, of course, you can also go through Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins site, they keep a very good data in terms of the infection, how it's being transmitted, and where they are prevalent and stuff like that. So those would be the areas I will look at: the CDC, WHO, National Institute of Health, And Johns Hopkins is a good place to go to as well, because they are the where we have most of the authorities, in this field. That's where they are. And can we get information through other news sources? Maybe, you just have to listen to who the messenger is, who is the messenger, what is the agenda, those are things when you watch the news, who is speaking and what are they saying. So again, that would be my recommendation for you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was interesting in this particular situation. There have been times, of course, I know you know this, when the CDC and the WHO have directly contradicted one another. And I understand that this is so new, recent, always developing, and that is just par for the course. And so that's why I was hoping to find, like some data myself. So thank you for
definitely you will see some contradictions between those various bodies in some segments. The contradiction is not way off. It's just a question of the data that they are looking at, but then who is feeding them the data? Because they have, for example, we know that Johns Hopkins feeds most of these entities with the data. They have a way of tracking, and then the sequencing of COVID-19 is something, frequent sequencing of COVID-19 is something relatively new to us here in the United States. It wasn't something that we were doing much before, but we started it just to keep up with the variants. And so based on that, you could have conflicting or contradictory statements coming from World Health Organization and CDC sometimes. You could have that. And then, of course, sometimes to, remember that the World Health Organization, they have people feeding them information from different parts of the world. But overall, CDC is the most credible health epidemiological health institution in the world. Everybody in the world calls on CDC when it comes to things like pandemic or epidemics and things like that, transmission of diseases anywhere in the world. If CDC is at the very beginning of the COVID, of course, we noticed what happened in Wuhan, China, and of course, where they had to let go of the CDC personnel that were there and send them out. So that's why we were very slow in getting information. If the CDC people were still on the ground at the time, maybe we could have gotten more credible information to be able to slow down the transmission. Any other question? Question? No question? All right. As always, it's nice having everyone join us today. We look forward to another series of this. We are just going to keep it on this conversation level, COVID, all things COVID, for the rest of the semester. So we are going to meet again in October and in November. Again, remember, if it is the last Monday of the month, it is the Dean's Forum. So we're looking forward to seeing every one of you again. And if you have questions, feel free to send your question my way. And we are going to do our best to answer those questions. And then, of course, if you have questions for the future Dean's Forum, you can get your questions ready and send it to us ahead of time, or research a little bit on your question and bring those questions and share it with the rest of us when we gather again in a month's time. So again, I thank you for joining. and you have a good day. And that will end our conversation for today. It's almost 1 o'clock. Some of you have classes to go. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Ibe.
Thank you.